Hello friends, welcome to my channel. This video is a third video in this series, and in this video we are going to talk about two most commonly used annotations in Hibernate, which are one-to-many and many-to-one. In a relational database, we usually see this parent and child relationship between tables. If we want to implement the same thing in Hibernate between entities, we use these annotations one-to-many and many-to-one. This video has two sections. In first section, we will see that how we can implement these annotations, and in second section, we will see that how we can fetch and insert record in tables when entities have this parent and child relationship. So let's get started. Right now we have this table cities in our database which has these two records, right? But since there is no mapping for country here, we actually do not know to which country these cities belong. So how we can map a country name with every city? One way to do that is just add a column country name and put that country name there. But in terms of space, this would not be an optimum solution because we may have to repeat the country name again and again for different cities, right? And moreover, in terms of time also, it is a bad option because if you want to update a country name like US to United States, it is going to be a time consuming one as compared to the other option that we are about to discuss. So what is that? What we can do is we can just add one more table, like in our case a country table, and we can put all countries there, and then we can add a column in this table, in cities table, and where we can hold the primary key of the parent country row in that table. So let's do that. I'm gonna add a table countries, then column country ID serial not null primary key country name character varying not more than 50 not null. Save. Let's make some entries. India and US. Save it. 1 and 2, just map these cities with their parent. So properties, column, add a column country ID integer not null and default value 0. Save, refresh. Now here 1 2 and save. So we have mapped these cities with their respective countries, right? I have mapped Delhi to number 1, which is India, and New York to number 2, which is US. So let's see how we can do the same thing in Hibernate using these one-to-many and many-to-one annotation. Let's create one more entity here for our newly created table, which is country.java here, and entity at table name is going to be countries. This is our table name, then ID generated value strategy generation type dot identity. Right, and then our property name, which is private int ID, and we need to map it to the column which is in our table, and in this case it is going to be a country ID, right? And the next column is country name and private string country name. Now just create a getter and setter for these. Source action getters and setters. Okay, so this is our entity class for countries table, but right now we do not have any mapping or any relationship between these two entities. So let's do that. Create a property for parent, which is country, and annotate it with many to one. Many instances of city can have one instance of country as a parent, right? But sometimes people get confused, like where to put many to one and where to put one to many. So the easy trick to remember this is the left hand side of the two is going to represent the current class, which is many, is going to represent the city class, and the right hand side, which is one, is going to represent the property class, which is this one. Okay, so many city can have one country. Now the next annotation is join column. Here we need to tell Hibernate that which column in cities table holds the primary key or ID of the country. So in our case it is country ID, right? Now let's create getter and setters. Right click, source action, getter setter, and done. Okay, so this is it with city class. Now let's move to the country class. Let's create a property for childs, which is set, because one country can have multiple cities, and annotate it with one to many, because one instance of country can have multiple instances of city, right? Now join column, which is going to be same country ID, and now let's create getters and setters for this property. Source action, getter setters, right? So this is how we can define a parent-child relationship in Hibernate. Let's move to the next section of this video, which is how to fetch and insert record in a table. First, run this application and we will hit this endpoint to get all cities, right? And now with output, we supposed to see this object as well, the object of country. Okay, localhost get cities, and the output is a complete mess. So why this is happening? We are getting only object of Delhi, and with that we are also getting the parent country, which is fine, and in that country object we have all child cities, and in child cities we again have country object. So this is the problem here. Hibernate is stuck in a continuous loop. So let's break this loop. Go to Visual Studio Code, and here in country class, what we can do is we can simply annotate this property with @JSON ignore. We have already seen this property in our previous video. Okay, JSON ignore. What it does, like whenever we generate output, this particular property is not going to include in that output. Okay, so this should resolve our problem. Kill this terminal, run this application again. Now again get cities, and now it is working, right? So this is how we can fetch records from the table, and this time we are also getting the parent entity, right? Now let's check how we can insert a new city in a cities table. Go back to Visual Studio Code, and this time we are going to hit this endpoint at city, and we will pass the object of city. Okay, open Postman. Now create a post request to localhost add city, and we are going to add a raw body parameter, which is going to be a JSON request. Okay, and just copy this string from here to here, because we are going to add a new city in India, Maharashtra. Okay, and MH, send, and our request has been processed successfully. We can check it by hitting this endpoint again. Okay, so we are getting the newly added city, and you can cross check it in database also. So this is one way of inserting record in tables when we have relationship between these entities. Okay, now let's check the another way to do that. Let's create one more endpoint at the rate post mapping, save city, and public city add city, and this time in request body we want user to pass something else instead of city object. Okay, let's create one pojo file first, pojos, and new file, city request java. Okay, and we need user to pass id of the city, string of city name, and city code, and lastly the id of country. Okay, let's make it public so that we don't have to create getter and setters. Save city request, and this time return city service dot add city. We are going to pass this city request. Right, now let's create this function in city service class. So now we have the object of city request in city service class, and we know that in this city request we also has the country ID. So the first step that we need to do is, using that country ID, we need to find that country from the country table. To do that, let's use this service for country also. Okay, auto void. Now country repository, we will create this file. Okay, country repository, and we are going to create this file now in repositories folder, new file, country repository .java, at repository, and this is going to be an interface, extends country JPA repository country, and ID is an integer. Okay, import this class. Now here we need to declare a function which is going to return the object of country, and function is find by ID. Okay, and we need to pass the ID of the country here, and we have auto void this country repository here, and now we can access this function from our city service class. Okay, so let's get the object of country first, equal to country repository dot find, not this one, country repository dot find by ID, city request dot country ID. Right, now we have the object of country. Create a new object of city now, city equal to new city, city dot city name, set city name equal to city request dot city name, and city dot set city code, city request dot city code, and city dot set country, country. Right now, city repository dot save city. Okay, save this file, save this file as well, kill the terminal and run the application again. This time we need to call this endpoint with JSON request, but this time we need to pass only the ID of country instead of the object of country. Okay, now send this. Here we are getting successful message, and in database we can cross check it, and we can hit this endpoint again to cross check that. Okay, so this is the second way to do that. Now there is one more approach that we can use to save the record in tables, so let's try that one also. You might have noticed that in our cities table we have this field here, country ID, which we haven't specified here in our city entities, right? We do not have any explicit definition for that particular field. However, Hibernate is using this reference to that field to do all its job. Okay, and since we have used reference for that field here, it doesn't mean that we cannot have an explicit property for that field. Okay, so let's define one field, country ID, and let's map it with that column. Okay, name equal to country ID. Right, now let's specify the getter and setter, because we are going to use this property in our next example. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit a save request with city object, but this time I do not want to pass the object of country. Okay, I'm going to pass the ID of country only, and I do not want to do these things either, because what we are doing here is first we are submitting the select country query to our database, and then we are submitting the insert query. Okay, so basically Hibernate is like submitting two queries to perform this operation, and we do not want that. We want only one query to be executed to perform this job, and for that we need to make few changes in this annotation join column. Actually we need to specify two more properties so that we can tell Hibernate that, hey, whenever we submit save request or update request, please completely ignore this particular field. Okay, and these properties are insert table equal to false and update table equal to false. Okay, now Hibernate will completely ignore these fields during these operations. Okay, so let's check this. We are going to hit this endpoint. Okay, run, first kill the terminal, run without debugging. Go to postman, post localhost 8080 add city, body raw request JSON format, and here ID is going to be 0, city name is going to be like job, city code PB, and country ID. let's send this. Okay, we are getting response, so let's check this one. Refresh our database, and here's our city. We can check this here also, right? So these are the ways that you can use to insert record in a table whenever we have this parent and child relationship between entities. And you can use any of these approach whichever suits your requirement, right? So this is it for this video, and if you like this video, please hit that like button and please subscribe to my channel because it really motivates me to come up with new videos. Thanks for watching. Bye bye. Take care.